Welcome to the Citizen Experience Podcast, where we speak with government and business leaders who are bringing positive change and social outcomes for communities across the country. I am your host, Keith Scott. Welcome to the conversation. So today's guest is Dr. Danika Tynes. She is a social impact entrepreneur and founder of Sustainable Access Foundation. It's a nonprofit organization that provides funding and scaling strategies for communities in developing countries. Uh, she's also an adjunct professor at Morehouse College here in Atlanta. So I would, love to invite our guest, Dr. Tynes. How are you doing?
I'm wonderful. It's so good to see you.
Good to see you.
Uh,
Good to see you.
Thank you for having me. I think it's so appropriate that you have a podcast because you're so well versed in so many different areas that to bring that interdisciplinary thought to the citizen conversation. I think it's great.
Thank you. Thank you. I know we've been talking for some time and worked a little bit together on a couple of things. But I'm glad to have you here, and so we can discuss, what you've been doing recently. And you founded SAFE Social Impact uh, uh, as you're consider yourself a social impact entrepreneur. So explain what that is to our listeners, because we do a lot of work in social equity, and there's some synergy there. So explain what a social impact entrepreneur is.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty active term. I like it. It sounds a little ambiguous, but it
Mhm.
feels specific for me. And the way
Right.
I interpret a social impact entrepreneur is number one is I'm an entrepreneur, so
Right.
in running the foundation, and I work with entrepreneurs, and those are the organizations that I support through the foundation. And
Mhm.
so, and so there's that entrepreneurship component. But also is that as a foundation, one of the things that is important to my foundation, it's called Sustainable Access Foundation, is sustainability.
Right.
And so finding new ways, as entrepreneurs, to bring additional funding capacity
Hmm.
to the social impact agenda. So, for example, starting new businesses and then
Hmm.
taking the profit and rerouting that to social impact endeavors. So it's also not just me being an entrepreneur and funding entrepreneurs, but
Right.
it's also finding new sustainable ways to drive additional funding for impact. And the social component of it is, of course, community and supporting one another. I
Sure.
think it's become really important to me as I've gotten older and as I've lived through what we've all lived through
Hmm.
collectively,
Hmm.
which has been a lot of trauma. And it's, made me realize, that we are so not separate anymore,
Right.
that our borders and that our nation states, it's like they're almost arbitrary, that
Mhm.
someone can get on a plane and the whole world is now on lockdown, all experiencing the same thing. To me, that made society feel real to me.
Mhm.
It felt like we were really all in this together, and that which happens abroad actually
Mhm.
happens to us here locally. So that
Mhm.
global local conversation that felt very like maybe even more theoretical to me before. It felt really real. It became very
Mhm.
real to me, and the need for us to pull together for each other. And my background is in the innovation space and digital health and digital enablement, um, and we do a lot of amazing innovation in that space.
Mhm.
And but how are we innovating, right?
Mhm.
Are we innovating consciously? Are we innovating just so that we could get like faster at stuff?
Right.
Like Chat GPT, right? are we
Oh
are we
yeah.
using that so that we can get by on our homework,
Mhm.
or are we using that so that we can do our research faster so we can
Mhm.
solve a social problem?
Right.
And so the social aspect is really important. And then impact, I think, is also a loaded term, because it's not just like running around giving out money
Mhm.
and starting new businesses and helping entrepreneurs be wealthy, right?
Right. Right. Right.
Is
Right.
impact to me is a loaded term because it implies change. It implies that there is going change for the positive. And
Right.
so that impact piece is not just are we innovating? Are we empowering one another to take hold of our own legacies,
Mhm.
and grow our wealth within our communities so that we're not looking outside anymore, so that we could grow that capacity from within. And to do that, there needs to be change from what we're looking
Mhm.
at today. Like COVID took us all back so many years, um,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
socially.
Yeah.
And I think
Some of us
that,
haven't come back from that, right? I mean,
yeah,
it's
us
still
having
rough.
to come back from that is like we really got to pull up our hunches and pull
Yeah.
up our pants and go,
Yeah.
where are we routing our finite resources? Um, People who are willing to engage with community,
Mhm.
um, on a human level,
Right. So,
and to support humans. And so I think it is important as well, I guess, to end that piece is that we have to measure our impact.
mhm.
And that's the techie part of me,
Mhm.
is that like I want to know just like the small test of change. Did this work?
Mhm.
No. Did it
Mhm.
fail? Yes. Did it? Then let's
Mhm.
move on, kind of thing. And so I think that impact is important. So that was a long answer to what is a social impact entrepreneur. But for me, it really is. For me, it really is like a lifestyle now,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
so all of those words have meaning. Yeah.
So when did the epiphany come that you wanted to start this foundation?
hmm I think it has a lot to do, again, with like the past 3 years of
Okay.
Black Lives Matter and hashtag Me
Right.
Too and
Right.
pandemics and wars. And I live in Atlanta,
Yeah.
and the political tension here is very real,
Yeah.
um, and very in your face. And so it's like we're consciously living, I think, with through trauma,
Mhm.
together. I have this feeling that we've all lived through this collective trauma, and we're all just trying to do the best that we can to figure out what next. And in that quiet time, I was fortunate. I was able to work at home. And
Mhm.
so I had a lot of downtime to think, to ponder, to step back and to say, why are we really here? And we
Mhm.
look at what's going on in the workforce, right? There's so much fluctuation. I think
Mhm.
it's as a result of the fact that we just went through all of this together collectively, and we haven't really figured out how to put our finger on what we just went through. And so I think we're starting to emerge.
Mhm.
Um, but where we're emerging is like in the workplace. You've got a lot of people, quiet quitting and
Yeah. Yeah.
or just job hopping and so forth. It's a very tumultuous employment market. And what I saw sitting, my last work was with a digital health startup called Evidation,
Mhm.
doing amazing work, um, and um, and what I found in across working in that startup was I felt like people were not feeling their impact.
Mhm.
And then I
Their purpose.
started kind of,
Mhm.
yeah, I
Mhm.
think that's what it was. And
Right.
so, the job hopping, that it's just, we're working so much, but there's all of this stuff going on that we just, don't have time to get to like kind of processing. And so
Right.
we're going to work and we're spending all of this time at work, working hard, working long hours, but we
Mhm.
want it to have meaning now.
Mhm.
Right. After
Mhm.
everything that we just went through, I think I'm getting the sense that people are really looking for meaning. And um I was one of those too. you know.
Yeah.
I was looking for meaning in my work. And, when we're spending a lot of our time in meeting after meeting after meeting, going through, detailed processes,
Yeah.
you know
Pulling
that
it down. Yeah.
your reason for being there in the larger scheme of things is important.
Yeah.
But touching and feeling your impact
Yeah.
um, isn't necessarily accessible in those conditions. And so I wanted to touch and feel mine. And I
Hmm.
recently had a friend who passed away,
Hmm.
and she lived her life out loud, and I just so admired how she did that. And
Hmm.
one thing she asked me, she said, Danika, um, uh, while she was on her way transitioning, she says, Danika, um, do me one thing. Do me this. If you're putting anything off in life,
Mm,
do
mm,
it now,
mm.
right?
Yeah.
Or else I'll come back and haunt you, is what she said.
Well,
And
if you put it that way, I guess you got
I
to do
just
it
or else I'll come back
now.
and haunt you. And so when I took stock and I was feeling that need, my own need
Mhm,
to feel my impact and watching
mhm,
others, this reverberating around others wanting to feel their impact, I said, well, what is that thing I've been putting off? And I
yeah.
went back and I looked back over my career and my journey, and everything I've done was about access,
Mm, mm.
about increasing. So
Access to
telehealth,
resources.
right? So like
Yeah,
telehealth. I did my whole dissertation on telehealth.
right.
And then during COVID, I got a lot of phone calls about like, what is this telehealth thing? Please help
Mm,
us, figure this thing out. It seems like a good solution. And I had been doing telehealth for 15 years, but to me, it was a no brainer. And
mhm,
prior to COVID, we really had to sell telehealth to the market. Like we had to explain the benefits and da 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 da.
yeah,
Da. And
yeah,
now it's just so obvious, right? It's
yeah.
literally the only way that you can deliver care
Mhm,
without risking exposure to
mhm,
a virus, right?
mhm,
And
mhm,
so, the advantage of adopting telehealth became very clear. The comparative advantage became very clear
mhm,
of adopting telehealth once COVID hit. But so telehealth to me is a way to create geographical access, like or to address the geographical access barrier rather.
right,
And
right.
so the things I've always been interested, like electronic health records, like I think were you there boots on the ground for EHRs back in the day before it was meaningful use and all that?
I think so.
Okay,
I'm
so yeah,
old
it
enough.
was so
Yeah.
long ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like I remember, trying to get HIEs approved,
Yeah.
and when nobody was even thinking about it. And now
Yeah.
it's like it's a regular thing. And so
Mhm,
for me, it was access to data. No, we need EHRs because let's standardize this thing. Let's do interoperability. Like I was always
mhm,
there fighting, for
mhm.
that access, but very much from a technology perspective and a standards
Right,
perspective and an academic perspective and so forth. And then I went and my PhD is in international development.
right.
And so I went, oh, what am I putting off? And I went back and I went, well, your passion and your purpose is access.
Mm,
And your love
yeah.
is international development,
Mm,
is
mm,
systems. I love
mm,
systems development. I don't
mm.
like to like take one little tiny problem. I want to know the whole
Right, the
problem.
big picture,
And
zooming
yeah, I
out,
want
right,
to know the whole
right,
problem and then look at that from an interdisciplinary lens.
right,
Um, and we've got this is the sustainable part is that we also don't want to just create change and
right.
create a charity model. We want to empower, and I also want that for myself, right? So when we're leaning into our impact and our purpose, it's really much also a very personal healing, right?
Mhm,
Because I've wanted access in my life that I haven't had, and so
mhm,
I've worked hard to achieve that. And so if someone opened a door for me
Hmm.
like this big, I just kick that thing open and be like, here I am and take up the
I'm there.
space.
I'm here. Yeah.
Right, right. But see, you have to be ready for your access points, right?
Right. It's true.
And so access is really important to me in my life as well. And so I wanted to be able to share more access points with other people because
Right.
I figure a lot of people have that. It's like they have the
Mhm.
will, they have the drive, they have the desire, they have the knowledge, but just no way to get there. And
Mhm.
especially, being a minority,
Yeah.
being
Yeah.
Black, being a woman, is like there's not a lot of access. And so when you find those access points, they're just
Mhm.
very important that you hold on to them, and and fully take advantage of them. And
Because they'll
not
close, right? I mean, that access opens up for a short period of time, and then if you don't take advantage of it,
Mhm.
it can go elsewhere, right?
Exactly. And that's a
Yeah.
very psychologically stressful way to live.
Hmm.
Um, you know, I all the Black women that I know are the most highly educated
Hmm.
in their fields, and
Hmm.
yet, kind of competing still toe to toe with people who are less educated or
Yeah.
qualified or what have you.
Seeing
And
that.
that,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, that's been my experience is, you know, and I still have challenges with my own access,
Hmm.
and it's unnecessary. And so, to the extent that I can create more access points for more people, and then bring together my love for global development, systems development, as well as create more of a apply more of
Hmm.
an interdisciplinary lens. So I have a master's in organizational psychology
Hmm.
from San Diego State, and then in my undergrad is in psychology,
Hmm.
and but then my whole career has been in technology,
Hmm.
and so merging and blending
Hmm.
those disciplines has been something I'm also bringing to the social impact space, which is thinking in terms of small tests of change, doing things more with more agility, and then also leveraging the full strength of innovations that are coming out, in the different tools. And as I'm setting up my business as an entrepreneur,
Hmm.
is I'm going into I'm setting myself up to scale.
Right.
So, right now I'm looking for a CRM tool that I can use, um,
I have
and
some recommendations for you,
oh,
so we'll talk about
fantastic.
that.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, I can use all of that. So,
Yeah.
I'm really at the baby stages, just getting website up and figuring
Mhm.
out branding and all of this. And, and,
But
yeah,
I did see a beautiful 2 minute caption of you in Africa.
yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, so that's what led me here is I was kind of like sitting there at the pinnacle of my career in
Mhm.
Silicon Valley, hanging out with like the coolest
Mhm.
CEOs, two female CEOs,
Mhm.
um, sharing, running a company, a global company, just doing amazing work. It was everything I wanted to do. And it was that request of my
Mhm.
friend who said, if there's
Mhm.
anything you're putting off, do it now. And this is really what I've always wanted to do, is to be in the position. And I feel
Mhm.
very grateful to say I am, to create space to support communities. And so it was like a switch from being more self-focused, I'll say, to
Mhm.
being more
Mhm.
of
Outward.
service.
Yeah.
And so that's where I am now, is I just want to shift my energy into the social impact, into being of service. And so anything I can bring, any kind of access I can bring, I feel like
Mhm.
now it's time for me to share. Same way with being a adjunct professor at Morehouse School of Medicine. I'm there now. I was a student for so long, and at
Mhm.
some point, it's like time to stop being
Doing.
the
Yeah.
the student and to start sharing
Mhm.
some of your lessons. So I teach systems acquisition
Mhm.
to the at the in the master's program for health informatics.
Mhm.
And so I get to still have my geek space there, where I can geek out on all things
Yeah.
systems and stay up
Yeah.
with, the latest trends and so forth. So
Yeah. It keeps you fresh. So you did mention that your friend was going to haunt you if you did not follow your dreams there.
Exactly.
I'm
It's
assuming you're not
so
seeing any moving objects around the
no,
house.
there's
Okay.
none. I think that she would be really thrilled.
Okay.
Um, as a matter of fact, so with everything, and I did go to Uganda
Hmm.
the first month of this year,
Okay.
and I was able there to meet with an organization called Roots Africa and
Hmm.
Babubuka Foundation. I had no agenda, Keith, when I got there. And so, just for your listeners, the transition from working
Hmm.
for corporate America and the safety of having a 401k and
Yeah.
a nice salary and shares and la la, right?
Yeah.
All of that is, um, it's, uh, it became part of my identity.
Hmm. Hmm.
It was very easy for me to know who I was when I had a title and like a affiliation and so forth.
Hmm.
And so switching to now, who am I without that role, those
Right.
roles,
Right.
and those masks in society? Who am I? It was, it was a transition. So
Hmm.
the best way I know how to deal with something like that is to just sit back and watch, like not try and be in my head too much about it. So I start the foundation. I'm working with my dear friend in Uganda,
Hmm.
Babaluku. He's a hip hop artist,
Oh, okay.
and he's the founder of Babubuka Foundation. And
Mhm.
so back last July, he calls me and he says, I'm looking for funding for a community center for
Mhm.
community artists who want a place to incubate their craft and grow their
Mhm.
businesses.
Mhm.
And I went, Baba, that's beautiful. And I have more than I need and I want to help.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I said, but when I'm done
Mhm.
with giving you the more that, the extra that I
Right.
have,
Right. Right.
will you still need more money?
Right.
And he said, yeah.
Right.
And I was like, let's think about this. How could
Mm.
we fund you so
Continuous.
that
Yeah.
you don't have to always keep asking for more money?
Right.
And then so that's when the wheels started turning, and so that is the basis of
Mm.
my business model. Um, so fast
That's the
forward.
sustainable. That's the sustainable part.
Yes, that's the
Yeah.
sustainable part. It's like, but wait, because you're gonna always be asking, and
Mhm.
I'm not hearing that you wanna ask. I'm hearing that you have a lot of ideas that you want to employ
Mhm.
and trigger and enact and
Mhm.
activate and
Mhm.
empower, and the community strength in Uganda is so formidable. We have so much to learn from how they can organize as a collective. And and so I was like, I think that we can do this together. We can figure out a way where you're actually generating revenue for yourself or
Mhm.
position you at least. So I can invest into you up to a point.
Mhm.
But to that point, we're going to set you up where you're going to be able to get so much investment dollars or sustain yourself through whatever entrepreneurial endeavor. And so I get to Uganda and I was, and I'm going through this change of, stepping into my purpose and my path, and
Mhm. Mhm.
just me on the plane. And before I get there, Bob was like, uh, what's your itinerary when you get here? I said, I have no itinerary.
Mhm.
I've been living by itinerary for the
Yeah.
past many, many
Yeah.
years.
Structured and yeah.
Unfortunately, that itinerary has taken me from my path.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to try something new and I'm just going to get there and let's just see.
Yeah.
And so I land there on January
Mhm.
1st, and the first meeting I take is with a community women's entrepreneur network, and from
Mhm.
there I had meetings every single day until I left, culminating in a dinner at the Airbnb house where I stayed,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
that brought together all of the people that I met along my journey.
Mhm. Mhm.
And in that time, I was able to go to about 12 villages, 4 districts, met with hundreds of of people in the communities. And I was able to just sit back and listen and learn and
mm,
ask, what is your access point?
mhm, mhm,
And so it was very validating to learn that the word access was it translated um,
mhm,
in Uganda very easily. It was
mhm,
very easy for the
mhm,
entrepreneurs there to say what they needed.
mhm,
And coming in from a listening perspective, it completely changed my mind about international development.
mm.
Whereas oftentimes we think that we have a solution, and we're guilty of this as well in business always,
Yep.
is we say, and I teach this to my students, I try to really drive it home. It's like,
Mhm.
put your needs first, get your requirements down, and then go
Right,
pick your system. In the
right.
same way is like understand what the needs are first. Don't try and like
Mhm,
bring a solution. So one of the things I'm seeing now in the development space, in
mhm,
innovation, we're trying to bring a lot of artificial intelligence to solve development problems and so forth.
mhm,
We're not asking actually at the root level, what are the problems? Because we think we know, but we don't.
mhm, mhm.
Um, I will give you a really quick example.
Okay,
Let me ask you a question. If I
sure.
said, Keith, um, how can we solve world hunger? Give me one way we can solve world hunger.
Yeah, so
Really, I mean, just pick one. I mean, we could grow a
I
bunch of
would,
food together.
I would kind of just pull resources together from um, partnering countries, right, and just pull those resources and try to deploy them. That's the easy answer, right?
I
But
love,
I would have
actually,
to. Yeah.
I didn't think of that, but that's a really good
Mm,
one.
mm,
So I go and I'm in this farming community. I wanted to see all the way upstream, not just the product,
mm.
but I wanted to meet the farmers who made the
Sure,
product, the women who
sure.
packaged the product. I wanted
The
to
whole
meet the
supply
kids.
chain, right?
Yeah, and I
Yeah,
wanted to meet the kids of the farmers, you know.
right, right.
I wanted to know what was this whole scene like
Hmm,
and what goes into this.
hmm,
And so I meet this young man. He's about 22 years old, and his job is he starts an organization. He's absolutely
hmm,
brilliant. He works with these communities, and he goes to the farmers and he looks at what they have
hmm,
as crop, and then he optimizes their yields. And so
hmm.
now he's running a track record where he's been increasing farmer income by about 4 times. And
Removing
so
waste from the process, having more
and
viable.
applying
Got
innovations and so forth.
it. Mm,
And so he says to me, so I said, well, what is your access point?
mm-hmm,
And he said, space.
hmm,
And I went, wait, come again. He says, well, I just need
mm,
to buy a piece of land and I need to build a building. And then
mm-hmm,
I need to turn that building into a quality control facility.
mm,
And I was like, okay, so tell me more. So
mm-hmm.
here's this brilliant kid, right?
22, right? 22, 23. Yeah.
Yes.
Mm,
And he says, well, I have the optimization
mm-hmm,
down, but I
mm-hmm,
can only scale so far from there.
mm,
Because in order for us to regulate our products and increase our market share, we have
mm-hmm.
to have what? Quality control. So what
Right.
he's thinking all the way down the road to be able to position these farmers
Mm-hmm,
to get more of the global market share. And so he's positioned,
mm,
so his access point is to get a quality control facility. And
mm-hmm,
so then he will expand this model around all of Uganda. Guess what
mm-hmm.
Uganda is? It's farmland.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
guess what it has capacity to do? It has capacity to help feed the world.
Mm-hmm,
And so he wants to now create this infrastructure. And so my investment there is under $15,000
mm-hmm,
to create an infrastructure so that he can then position his communities to get more funding. And along the way, I'm telling you, they're brilliant at this collectivism, at the collective network.
Hmm.
That's why I thought your response is really good. I think it is about bringing together resources, and we
Hmm.
can do more of that. More partnership, is very important. So I do partner, like, I
Hmm.
break bread. I learn about their families. Is like, we're
Hmm.
partners in this. And what do you need for your success? I mentor, position, the same thing I'm doing in Silicon Valley, just
Hmm.
taking that energy of helping an already very successful organization position themselves for scale, help these small entrepreneurs position themselves just so that they can kick the door open to their access. And so my role is just to kind of early stage groom,
Hmm. Right.
position, and that's
Right.
that techie part of me that I love,
Right.
like to integrate. Yeah. Yeah.
So, what are the headwinds that you're facing? Some obstacles, because surely it can't just be you show up, you start writing checks, and you roll up your sleeves and you start getting your hands dirty with the work there. What are the obstacles? How do you make that happen internationally?
Well, I think what's, like I said before, is like, your purpose is also like your teacher
Hmm.
and your healer. And so I'm sharing with these young entrepreneurs how to build their infrastructure for scale and sustainability. I have to do that for myself.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
Right? And so while I'm doing that for them, I want to scale. So my goal is to reroute an additional $300 million
Hmm.
into impact investment in Africa.
Okay. Right.
That's my larger term goal. That's a
That's the
that's a
vision. It's the
that's a
target.
big goal, right?
Right.
But we have to start somewhere,
Right.
and maybe that will grow. And but and the reason why is because I don't know. Have you been following about the bank closures and so forth recently?
Yeah, because we have a business too, right? So I'm
Yeah.
closely aligned to the bank. So
So
yeah.
I get to see firsthand,
Hmm.
up close and personal, how much money goes into Silicon Valley
Right.
and how a government is so invested in that
Hmm.
innovation and
Hmm.
keeping that sacred, that money will flow into these ideas.
It's
And
a
if we
differentiator for the country, right? For the
Yes,
U.S.
right,
economy. Yeah.
right. And some of those are ideas, honestly, are just going to make us stupider. So if we could reroute, right? It's like if we could
And
reroute
lazy. And lazy. Don't
some
forget
of
lazy.
those
Yeah.
dollars to conscious innovation and social
Mhm.
impact innovation
Mhm.
and to people. So the stuff that they're coming up with in Uganda, and it's like old innovation, but it's new to
Mhm.
me. It's brilliant to
Mhm.
just bring that to market.
Right.
And so if we could just reroute even just a drop of the bucket of some of
Mhm.
those funds to tap into some of the ingenuity that is
Mhm.
global,
Mhm.
I really do think that we can open up so many spaces and opportunities.
Do
Yeah.
you see that because I know China is doing a lot of investment in Africa. Now, I'm not sure about Uganda, but I know they're doing a lot of investment in Africa. They see that as I don't want to say a bed of resources, but do you see the U.S. kind of really supporting this effort to invest in incubation in Uganda or any other parts of Africa? And is Uganda the only country that you're targeting? Or is that your target right now?
So no, eventually, but like I would do for, any business is,
Right.
I would recommend that they start, small and get
Hmm.
their business model established,
Hmm.
realize their impact, do their lessons learned, and
Hmm.
then position for scale. So I'll
Right.
start in Uganda,
Okay.
and then, get the business model right so that I can scale. And during that time, it's safe space, and
Hmm.
now I have just a full family there
Hmm.
to so that we can do this together. And so they're really gracious with, while I'm coming up with my tools and processes and so forth, working with me. So we're really doing it together.
Hmm.
um, and before we kind of roll out globally.
Hmm.
And so I think that's the right model for me right now, but
Yeah.
ultimately it'll be all over Africa.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you got a pilot, right? Lessons learned, like
Yeah,
you were
yeah.
saying.
But as far as the U.S. supporting that, China is wisely investing in
Hmm.
Africa.
Hmm.
But to be clear, what we want is not for other countries to be investing in Africa and removing their resources and pilfering.
Yeah,
Is we want those resources to stay in Africa and
right.
sustain African populations. And if that means that they can increase their market share
Hmm.
and build their own wealth and
Yeah.
legacies, then yes, like that's
Mhm.
what we want to empower, but not to go into Africa and buy it all up. And that is happening where,
Yeah.
a lot of the farmland is being, purchased. There's a lot of landowners,
Hmm.
especially elderly widows
Hmm.
who they're just being robbed of their land and their legacy, and that really is the wealth. In particular, mostly in Uganda, the wealth is the land, not
Yeah.
necessarily the money.
Right.
And so to me, to the extent that we can get more land back in the hands of Ugandas and empower them to fully leverage the wealth of their land so they can support themselves and not have to rely on aid,
Hmm.
that's what I would love to see for the future
Again,
of.
going back to sustainable, right? That's you're going
Mhm.
back to that word, that prominent word. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So when are
So
you going to
there's
go?
one project I think you would like be interested in is
Okay.
the that I'm funding, which is called the Black Soldier Fly.
Okay.
And so I did get to play with larvae, which AKA maggots, while I was there.
Yeah.
And the whole so if you ask, some of the things that are like, being open-minded, stepping out
Sure.
of that like corporate mindset and
Mhm.
you know, um, you know, going to the bathroom and like over holes and stuff like that. It's like coming out of that like Western mindset and just being
Right.
comfortable with like what really
Yeah.
is life. And so being there, standing there, going through this process. So there's black soldier fly. They take this
Mhm.
fly,
Mhm.
they harvest the larva, and then
Mhm.
this larva creates a fertilizer.
Mhm.
Fertilizer is an enormous emerging market, right? Because it's needed for farming to feed people,
Mhm.
and because of the Ukraine-Russia war, the cost of fertilizer
Mhm.
has
Mhm.
gone through the roof, and so now farmers are suffering in places like Uganda because they have to spend so much more
Right.
for fertilizer. So these again, young kids, they're 22, 23. They start this farm. They get a plot of land at the university there,
Mhm.
and they realize, wait, in order to actually get a lot of fertilizer, we're going to need a lot more harvest. So
Mhm.
here's what they do: they take this black soldier fly, and
Mhm.
then they harvest the larva. They get all the larvae together,
Mhm.
and then they gather waste, organic waste. Where do they get the waste from? They go and they clean up the streets. Okay. They engage the ghetto youth in
Mhm.
the slums there
Mhm.
to go and clean up the ghettos, gather
Mhm.
all of the organic waste,
Mhm.
bring it to their facility, and then they get paid for it. So now the ghetto youth are
Okay,
getting
so they
paid.
are compensated. They are
Okay, so
compensated.
follow
Okay.
this whole chain of right.
Okay.
And so now the ghetto youth are getting paid. Now, guess what? So then they go, well, we need more land in order to create more fertilizer. How do we do that? So they create an outgrower model. So now they're
Mhm.
giving kits of larvae that takes about 8 days to harvest. So they're giving these kits of larvae. People take these larvae back to their homes. They grow, they let the larva harvest for the 8 days, bring
Mhm.
it back, they get paid again.
Mhm.
And so this
Mhm.
up to about $60 a month is what they can get. So that's a
Mhm.
lot of money
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
from zero. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now so what's happening there is now you've got an environmental cleanup led by the youth. And so they have ambassadors, like waste ambassadors, and they're super proud of this, going
Mhm.
around making sure that people are cleaning up the neighborhood and getting this income throughout the neighborhood. And so it's really
Essentially, it's a business.
rising
Yeah.
the standard of living, right?
Yeah.
And so I
Yeah.
met one young woman, she was pregnant and she
Mhm.
lived in the ghetto. And so this was enabling her ability to pay for her prenatal care and so forth. So already the standard of living is going up, right?
Yeah.
And just from so little. So this
Mhm.
outgrower model, brilliant. And then And then he has this now change maker model. So
Mm-hmm.
what he's going to do, what I'm funding is a pilot with 10 change makers. Each
Mm-hmm.
one is going to be trained on his process. They're then going to go out and train 10 people.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's going to expand like that.
Yeah.
So I'm funding the initial training. He has, we initially put it on a website,
Mm-hmm.
so that will be his scalability model. So the incubation will be, we're going to try out training the farmers via website. So that they
Mm-hmm.
could just go in and listen, like we go to Udemy or
Right. Right.
Academy or
Right.
LinkedIn Learning or whatever. So it's kind
Coursera.
of similar. So he's providing those trainings available. We're going to be giving them cell phones, smartphones,
Okay.
so that they can also stay in touch with the network and about their
Mm-hmm.
yield and new tips and tricks on and so forth. So now they're creating a farming network.
Mm-hmm.
And the next step would be to build them an app.
Mm-hmm.
But we want to go ahead and see how this whole workflow goes.
Yeah. The pilot.
So all that to
Sounds
say,
good.
by the end of this, now they're going to have this fertilizer. Guess what? They're going to sell this fertilizer back to the farmers for 40% less than the leading fertilizer so that they can increase their profit margin. So
Mm-hmm.
this is all right. And
Mm-hmm.
so everyone is winning. Now,
Mm-hmm.
from these larvae, then what they showed me, talk about sustainable proposition, they're so brilliant,
Mm-hmm.
is from these larvae, you can actually extract oil after they're done with their fertilizer thing. You can extract oil and you can actually make beauty products and lotions and stuff out of it.
Oh,
And so
really?
this is like the next phase of things.
Uh,
So they have really, really big dreams, but it's that type of thing that I'm interested in.
so you've
And
literally just expanded their economy,
mhm,
locally, but I mean that can take
yeah.
flight, right? Yeah.
Hmm, hmm.
Okay.
So that to me is innovation. It's just different than has been done before,
Yeah.
and just being open to new possibilities. And their access point is help us nail our model, because
Mhm.
once they do, they'll be able to get funding from anywhere. You know?
Okay.
Yeah,
So let's definitely talk outside of this podcast on how we can work together. I'm
yeah,
I'm interested in seeing what's going on. Of course, I've never been to Africa, so I would love that opportunity as well. But I appreciate your time. I know we're up against the clock here, but how can people get in contact with you and
yeah.
learn more
So
about the work that you're doing?
wonderful. So the website is sustainableaccessfoundation.org. And because I'm just starting, well, we still have to get all of our social media and so forth. But you can also find me on LinkedIn and reach out directly if there are any questions or contributions. Right now, we'll be partnering with Yavapai Community College.
Okay.
To do some upskilling for some of our partners in Uganda, as well as maybe do a exchange.
Hmm.
So definitely, if there's partnership opportunities where we could do any kind of upskilling or in Uganda, I could always bring groups to, so we could talk about that. Yeah.
All right, we'll have that information on our podcast notes and really promote that too. And to our listeners, thank you again for joining the Citizen Experience podcast. I hope today's podcast was very enlightening. It definitely was for me, and look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Citizen Experience podcast with your host, Keith Scott. If you're interested in creating a strategic plan that builds a diverse, equitable, and inclusive workforce, please contact us at dei@klscottassociates.com, or you can call at 404-692-5552. Thank you for joining the conversation.